John chapter 2, verses 1 to 12, the wedding at Cana. The Greek word that we will be featuring in this section is number 3631, wine, and the Greek grammatical structures will be numerals and numbers. And it begins in chapter 2. Ke ti imera ti triti gamos ageneto en Cana tis Galileas. And in the third day a wedding took place in Cana of Galilee. Now it's interesting why it would say the third day. So what were the first and the second day? Well, in 129 it says John sees Jesus when he was immersing in Bethania. So this would lead me to believe that this Bethania is actually a city or a town that's close to the top of the Lake of Galilee, not the Bethany that's near Jerusalem, as I mentioned, I think, in the last couple of sections ago. And so that would be I think the first day. And the next day it says in John 1:35 that John and his two disciples saw Jesus, and the two disciples follow Jesus, and I believe one was Andrew. And then in that day it says in 139, the two disciples stayed with Jesus that day. Then the next day, after the two disciples stayed with Jesus, we see Andrew, Simon, Philip, and Nathanael all being mentioned and coming together. And then the third day, we have the wedding at Cana, which is right here. Cana is up here by the Sea of Galilee. Cana. Nazareth over here is where Jesus was living, and the wedding at Cana, and then they go over to the Sea of Galilee as we go through this section. So the wedding took place in Cana. It doesn't say who they were, but they must have been fairly important people or wealthy people because they had a lot of wine, as we'll find out. And it continues, Ke in imitir tu Isu aki, and the mother of Jesus was there. Now, the mother of Jesus, we know from Matthew, Mark, and Luke, was Mary. But interestingly, Matthew 1:16, it says Joseph, the husband of Mary, Marias, which is in the genitive of Mary. And she was espoused to Joseph, and that's in verse 18 of Matthew 1. And then in 2:20 it says, Joseph, son of David, fear not to take to yourself Mary, Miriam, in this case, your wife, or the one in her is engendered from Holy Spirit. Some names are declined where you have the nominative, genitive, dative, and accusative having different spellings like you do many of the, or all of the nouns. But not all the time. Sometimes the person's name can be always the same. It wouldn't be declined, is what they call it. When you put it in, the nominative has a different spelling, which is the subject. Mary went would be the nominative, Mariam. And it's also the accusative. They went to Miriam, they went to Mary. But if it was of Mary, then it's Marias. And Maria, I think, is in the dative. We'll get to that. So Mary, Matthew 2:11, it says, and having come to the residence, they say they see the child with Mary, his mother, and that would be the three wise men, the three magi. Marias is then his mother Mary. And in Matthew 13:55, it says, is this not the son of the fabricator? Is not his mother called Mariam, Mary, and his brothers James and Joses and Simon and Judas? So again, Mary mentioned by name in Matthew. Then in Luke 1:27 to 56, it mentions Mary, Mariam, where the angel comes and says, "Fear not, Mary." Earlier, Joseph is told to take Mary. In verse 34, the angel talked to Miriam, and then she went, that is Miriam in the Greek, went to visit Elizabeth in Luke 1:38 to 56. Then in Luke 2:5 to 34, we have the story of the Nativity, where the name Mary appears. But again, Mary does not appear in John. Interestingly, though, what it does say in Matthew 12:48 about his mother, it says, "And having responded, he said to the one speaking to him, 'Who is my mother and who are my brothers?' as they came to visit, to see Jesus as he was ministering." In verse 2, it continues, "Eklethi they ke oi sus, ke imathite avtu," and were invited also Jesus and his disciples unto the wedding, iston gamon. Now, it might have been only the four disciples. It doesn't say which ones, so we don't really know there. In verse 3, ke esterisantos inu, and lacking wine, legi imitir to Isu pros avton, the mother of Jesus says to him, "Enon uk akusi," wine they do not have. The wine, word wine, number 3631, appears 220 times in the Bible. Now, I know there's a lot of churches that preach against drinking alcohol, but it's not biblical. As far as certain types it is, but most of the times people were drinking wine. Nothing prohibiting most people from drinking wine. We even see Melchizedek in Genesis 14:18, the king of Salem brought forth breads and wine, and he was priest of God the highest. Jesus was the order of Melchizedek. In Genesis 27:25, it says, "And he carried to him wine, and he drank," and that was Jacob by having his son bring him wine to drink. Wine was used in the sacrifices in the tabernacle, Exodus 29:40. It was also medicinal. We see in Luke 10:34, where the Good Samaritan used the wine on the wounds of the man that was beaten by the robbers. And then in 1 Timothy 5:23, Paul tells Timothy to take wine for his stomach's sake. But there were also prohibitions with wine. In Leviticus 10:9, it says, "Wine and liquor you are not to drink, you and your sons with you, whenever you should enter into the tent of the testimony." That would have been the priests. So whenever they're going into the tent of the testimony, I drink a little bit of wine, but I don't do it when I do a video. I kind of go along with this verse right here and not drinking wine when I enter the tent of the testimony. And what I have here is sort of a tent. I have soundproofing on both sides and in the back, and the books here in a small room of maybe 10 by 10. And Numbers 6:3, it says, "From wine and liquor he shall be pure," for the priests, or the high priest going in. In Judges 13:7, the mother of Samson is told not to drink wine. It doesn't say Samson was not to drink wine, but the boy was to be a Nazirite. But it's assumed that this was part of the Nazirite tradition. Daniel 1:8 says, "And Daniel put unto his heart, so as in no way he should be polluted in the table of the king, and in the wine of his banquet." Now, Could he drink? Has he drinking it in other places? He may very well have been. Luke 1:15, as far as John the Baptist or the immerser, it says, "For he will be great before the Lord, and wine and liquor in no way shall he drink." Then in Mark 15:23, with Jesus being on the cross, it says, "And they gave to him myrrh mixed with wine to drink, but he did not take," which is interesting when you think back at the Last Supper where Jesus says he wouldn't be drinking wine with them again. So he refused it on the cross in Mark 15:23. But in Romans 14:21, Paul says that he's not going to drink wine if it causes somebody to stumble, at least not in front of them. And then in Revelations 14:10, it talks about the wine of the rage of God in being a figure of speech for the wrath, the wine of the rage of God. Now, going back to our text in verse 3, the mother says that they do not, the wine, they're lacking. And in verse 4, legi av ti o Isus, ti ami que si gine. What is it to me and to you, O woman? Now he calls her a woman. He doesn't call her mother. Isn't that interesting? Now, gine can be a wife or a woman, so you could probably translate this and say, what is it to me and to you, O wife? But I don't think that's any better. He doesn't call her mother there. And he continues and says, upo iki ora mu, my hour is not yet come. Now, what hour he's talking about, this is the only place I could find in the Gospels where it says my hour. So I don't know why he used that phrase, but unless it's just a generally, my time isn't right for this. But then again, he changes, and the mother says, it says, legi imitir avtu tis diakonis, says his mother to the servants. A diakoni, a deacon, is the English derivative from that Greek word. Oti an legi imin piisate, whatever he should say to you, you do it. Now here's another interesting place. Why would she say that? It says this is the first miracle, as far as a miracle that anybody saw in public maybe. Maybe she saw things in him that we are not told about, that she knew that he had the power to do something about this wine. Doesn't really say, it just says this, what she is saying. I think that's very interesting. In verse 6 it says, Isen the aki idrie lithane ex. And there were there 6 water pitchers of stone, kimene kata ton kathorismon ton iutheon, being situated for the cleansing of the Jews. So this water in these big stone water pictures, it says, horuse ana metritas dio itris, having the capacity of up to 2 or 3 measures. I looked up the measure, the metritas, in number 3355. It says it's a measure of 7.5 gallons. So if that would be 2, it would be 15 gallons, and 21, something like that, 21 gallons in 3. And so up to that much. And there were how many? 6 water pictures. So if it was 15, that'd be 90 gallons. That sounds like an awful lot of wine. But I don't know how many people were there at that wedding. That's why I said I think it's this important person. The bathing tub in the temple held 3,000 metritas. So 3,000 times 7.5 would be how many gallons it would be in the measure. Now, I haven't figured it out to see if it worked out, if you would, that's how much it would take. I suppose somebody out there might want to do some figuring and go back and find the dimensions of the bathing tub, and then how many measures would that be. Now, the numbers, remember I was saying we're going to bring out. There's just a few of them here. We have the 6 right up here. X is 6, X. And then theo, we're 2, we have a duo. Or tris, tri, you can see the tri in there. Tris is 3. So those are all 3 are Roman Greek numerals. Now, Greek numbers or numerals can appear in different ways. You can have a letter which would equal a number, like the Greek alpha is 1. Vita, which looks like our B, would be 2, and so forth. And whenever you see these letters used in a numeric way, then you could figure out what it is. And that appears in Revelation, I think the last verse in chapter 13, with the number of the beast, and it has 3 Greek letters. They're all different. One is 600, the other is 60, and the third is 6. It's not 666. So this is the usage of the number as far as if it was a letter, but it's not here. We have here the cardinal numbers, duo and tris and x. And you can go, and these are numbers that have a word, like we say 1, O-N-E, 2, T-W-O, 3, T-H-R-E-E, and so forth. And those are cardinal numbers. And then there are ordinal numbers. That would be the first, the second, the third. F-I-R-S-T, and in the Greek has different words, of course. Protos, I believe, is number 1. So those are the 3 different ways the Greek can have a number appear, either an ordinal, a cardinal, or a letter. The Roman numerals are all letters. You have an I, which is 1, a V, which is 5, an X, which is 10, L is 50, and they have a scheme of putting these together to give a total calculation of sorts. There's a book here I have reading the mathematics and measurements of the Greek, and it has a page in here which has, you're not going to see it too well, but it's right up here. It has all the different letters with the equivalent number, like in the Roman numerals. Now, we use what's called Arabic numbers. And Arabic numbers don't look like Arabic writing, but they are basically a setup of 9 numbers and a 0. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. And that is the scheme of Arabic numerals, which we use today in English, called 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. Or 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I suppose you could argue either direction. I'm not sure. Now in verse 7 it continues, Legi avtis o Isus, Jesus says to them, Gemisate tas idrias idatos. Fill up the water pitchers with water. Ke egemison av tas eos ano. And they filled them up unto upward. So they were filled up full of water. In verse 8, Ke legi avtis antlisate nin. Draw out now. Ke ferete to architrisklino. And bring it to the chief attendant. Ke inigkan, and they brought. In verse 9, Os the egevsato o architrisklinos to idor inum gegemnimenon, but as the chief attendant tasted the water becoming wine? Ke uk idi pothen estin, and he knew not from where it was. Ide diakoni idi son, but the servants knew, the ones that poured the water. E intli kotus to idor, the ones having drawn the water. And phoni ton nymphion o architris glinos, and the chief attendant calls the groom in charge of the wedding. Ke legi avto, and he says to him, pas anthropos proton, there's proton first. So there's the ordinal. First, ton kalon enon tithisi, first the good wine he places. Ke oten methisthosi, and whenever they should be intoxicated, tote ton ilaso, then the lesser. So people were getting intoxicated, they're drinking. And so intoxication is in the Bible. It says in Genesis 9:21, and he, Noah, drank from the wine and became intoxicated and became naked in his house. And you can go on the whole story about that with Shem, Ham, and Japheth, his three sons. Lot was caused to become intoxicated by his daughters who wanted to have children in Genesis 19:32. Moses, coming down from the mountain, heard this commotion in the camp, thinking that everybody was drunk. It says that in Exodus 32:18, who he talks to Joshua. Ephesians 5:18, Paul says, be not intoxicated with wine, in which is carnality. So it's best not to become intoxicated, but people that drink wine, some of them drink too much and become intoxicated. When I was a kid, young kid, I don't know, 13 or 14, we got a bottle of wine somehow, and I drank the whole bottle. It almost killed me, really. It was horrible. And so I don't get intoxicated because I almost died from it. Now, I may drink a little, but not very much. It's really very dangerous. And then he continues, si tetikrikas ton kalon enon eosat arti. You have kept the good wine until just now. So Jesus didn't make bad wine. He made really good wine where this chief attendant could tell, like, wow, this is really good. In verse 11, Taftin episantin arkin ton Simeon o Isus in Cana tis Galileas. This, the beginning of the signs Jesus did in Cana of Galilee. Signs, miracles, almost the same thing. John 4:48, Jesus says, if you should not see signs and miracles, in no way should you believe. Many people want to see a sign. And so this was the beginning of the signs. Now, maybe the family saw things that he did, or Mary saw him do certain things. We're not told. So that would just be a possible guess because of how she told the man to do what he says. So here is the first of the signs. It says, and he says, Ke ephanerose tein doxen avtu, and manifested his glory, the power that he was able to show to people in manifesting signs and miracles. Ke epistavsen isavton imathite avtu, and his disciples believed in him. So apparently they saw what happened, what he did, and now probably just the 4 apostles or disciples were the ones that saw it and believed in Jesus. And after this it says in verse 12, Metatuto katevi is Capernaum. After this he went down into Capernaum. Let's go back to our map. And Capernaum is right here. Capernaum, right here. So there over in Cana, And now they're going to go all the way over to Capernaum on the sea. Who? He, Avtos, Ke, Metir, Avtu, and his mother. Again, he doesn't call her mother, but the writer John does. Ke, Adelphi, Avtu, and his brothers. Ke, Mathite, Avtu, and his disciples. So here we are, very important distinction. The brothers, the disciples, the largest Christian denomination made up by man, tries to say that Mary never had any children, but yet she did. It gives their names, and they try to say, well, they're not real brothers, that were brothers in the Lord, but they're not. They're not disciples. It separates them right here, his brothers. So now the brothers somehow join. Whether they were at the wedding or not, we're not told. But in Matthew 13:55, it says, the people question, is this not the son of the fabricator? Is not his mother called Miriam, and his brothers James and Joses and Simon and Judas? So it gives the names of the brothers of Jesus. But it says in John 7:5, neither his brothers believed in him. So at this time, the brothers are sort of the same as the brothers of Joshua back in the Old Testament, who didn't believe anything the dreamer, their brother Joseph, dreamt. They hated him and wanted to kill him. Now, maybe these brothers had the same hatred. But then it says in Matthew 3:21, and hearing, the ones of his come forth to seize him. For they said that he is startled. Now, who are the ones of his coming forth to seize him? To me, it had to be the brothers, at least. Maybe his mother. And maybe they all came because he's startled. He's doing crazy things, saying that he's God and so forth, Son of God. But it all changes after his death and resurrection when they're in the upper room in Acts 1:14, where it says, these all were attending constantly with one accord in the prayer and in the supplication with the women, and Mary, the mother of Jesus, and with his brothers. And Mary here is called Maria. I believe that is in the dative, indirect object. Acts 1:14. So this is not John. John does not use the word Mary. And it continues, Aki, Eminan u polas imeras. And they stayed not many days. Apparently then they went back to Nazareth. Our next section, Jesus cleanses the temple. So now he goes to Jerusalem.